With Black Friday right around the corner, many of you are waiting to make your next TV purchase. The TV behind me should be at the top of the list. The Samsung QN90D Neo QLED Mini LED. Up next.
I've seen things people wouldn't believe.
Hey, what's up guys? I'm Brian. This is Tech Therapy. Thank you so much for joining me as we check out the Samsung QN90D Neo QLED Mini LED. I did a short review at the beginning of the year of the QN90D, but many of you weren't looking at it. A lot of confusion with this particular model, as a lot of you think it's the 4K flagship. It actually isn't. There is a QN95D, which is more readily available for custom installs only. So it puts it in a weird spot. The QN90D also has a ton of competition both below it and to the side of it. Below it being the QN85, which is a tremendous value with excellent picture quality, and then you also have the QD OLEDs, the S95D and the S90D, which is a tremendous value as well, making the QN90D too expensive at the beginning of the year. However, at the end of the year, before Black Friday, it is definitely recommended and one of the most regrettably forgotten TVs of the year that you should be looking at. Without further ado, let's check out the QN90D Neo QLED Mini LED. Thank you so much for watching. All right, guys, let's do it. Samsung QN90D Neo QLED Mini LED. I wanted to give you an opportunity to see it in my environment from all angles. You have a very sleek design. Love the center stand, very easy to assemble. The back is much simpler than the 8K lineup and even the QN95D lineup, as it lacks the actuator speakers at the bottom. No one connect box here. You have 4 HDMI 2.1, capable of 144 Hertz. Looks very good in this very bright room. Windows everywhere as we take a look at the very simplified remote. Solar powered remote can also be powered with a Type-C. I actually appreciate the remote after these years that it's gotten smaller. Now, the reflection handling is excellent. Samsung has the best in the business. It looks glossy, but it does have a finish that mutes the reflections. And even though the TV is very bright, it's not really the brightness, it's the reflection handling and the brightness that makes that combination in a room this bright. The majority of these demos will be shot in a very bright room. I'll change the room conditions throughout the video. The local dimming on the QN90D is excellent. Blooming is minimal. The transitions actually are very good as well, as we go through the settings to show you the flexibility of image, and we go through all of the presets. Special thank you to the one and only Jennifer Gala and her second channel, HDR Super Channel. Most of the material seeing within this video is her work. Check the description below for links to her amazing work. See how your TV looks with her content on it. For me, what really sets Samsung apart is flexibility of image. Each preset is very different from the last, and each one can be customizable. The tone mapping from static to active is very different. The contrast enhancer is very powerful. The color booster, all these settings can make a huge difference. You can go from accurate to that old school Samsung vibrant saturated look within just a few options, and each preset can be adjusted to your heart's content. I love that flexibility, and Samsung has been much more accurate than it has in the past, especially out of the box. The QN90D, especially for a near flagship display, has a ridiculous amount of sizes, both 43, 50-inch, 55-inch, 65, 75, 85, and 98 inches. This 75-inch at the time of the video is $2,400. Now, while it's not the top of the line, that's reserved for the QN95D. The QN90D does have flagship picture quality. It can hang with the top of the line LEDs from any of the manufacturers. You just don't hear from it or about it much, simply because Samsung has, if it's really a weakness, way too many options, and for many of you, it's overwhelming. As other manufacturers have taken their lines down, less options, Samsung has something for everyone. However, as I mentioned before, the QN90D was very expensive at launch and couldn't really compete with its own siblings, let alone the flagship QN900, QN800, and the QD OLEDs. But now that the price is down and it is below some of the competition, it's definitely one to check out. Amazing reflection handling, extremely bright, best gaming features in the business, very clear image, and as I mentioned, the local dimming is very good. Now, the QN90D is a VA panel instead of the ADS Pro, where they would mix and match, and the viewing angle is not quite as good. However, you see me very much off angle here, and it does retain it. Now, this is a larger size. I personally like VA better for the higher contrast ratio, and I didn't find that the viewing angle was a real problem. Perhaps at the smaller sizes you will feel that way, simply as there's less TV. Now, Samsung's approach to local dimming to minimize blooming is to dim the image slightly to make it look a little bit matte to keep the blooming from being more evident. I noticed that less this year, as the QN90D is very bright, and it's been much better than years past, where years ago you could see the entire image dim. Now, there is some blooming. I noticed it more in the middle of the image instead of around bright images, so it would come up at weird times. As you can see here with the black bars, they are completely black. You don't see the room change at all. You don't see any real haloing around the menus as I bring them up. Now, on Jen's video here, I tend to go right into dynamic so you can see where blooming would show up. Then I'll change it to filmmaker. But here off angle, the black bars are excellent. As I've mentioned, where I would see more blooming is once in a while, the middle of the image would end up being a little more flat versus real blooming. So local dimming, definitely a strength, definitely a very clear image. Also, excellent upscaling from Samsung. It has become a strength for them as the years have gone by. And as I mentioned, competition from Samsung from its own QN85. I do like the QN85 quite a bit. I do feel the QN90 is better. However, the delta in price was what keeps people away from the QN90. I've seen them both in person. QN85 is a tremendous value, but once the QN90D gets more affordable, it then becomes a very high-end value. The color reproduction is also very good in its most accurate presets. Going into, again, its local dimming, it handles these fast transitions excellent without really dimming the image. As I mentioned before and in years past, in order to knock down the blooming, the whole image would dim. You're not seeing that at all here. Again, very difficult demo material here. The speed of the flames typically will leave some trailing, and you don't have that here. More importantly, being a mini LED, you don't have any crushing of the blacks. There is excellent shadow detail. And while the competition from more budget-friendly models like Hisense and TCL, it's going back and forth between the two in the same building is where you can see the real differences here, especially in this demo, is the light stays where it belongs. There isn't a flattening of the whole image, which you would see from the other manufacturers. There is still the thought of you get what you pay for, and I do feel that extra little bit of money for the QN90D is worth it versus the competition. However, that's a challenge when it's double or triple the price. However, when it's only a little bit more expensive, QN90D is definitely something to look out for, which is why I'm revisiting it at this time of year, as Samsung also tends to drop the price before Black Friday. They tend to drop them slightly before everyone else. Now, the only real negative for the QN90D is that it was very expensive, and as I've mentioned, the competition from its own QD OLED lineup, namely the S90D. However, with reflection handling and the peak brightness of the QN90D, it is definitely the bright room choice. It annihilates both QD OLEDs in this same room, where they would tend to get very dull once the sun hit the screen. You don't have that here with the QN90D. Very vibrant even with the windows around. Though it's darker now as we film this, it has excellent bright room performance and excellent dark room performance as well. The quantum dot shows up, the colors are excellent. Now, as far as sound, the TV sounds pretty good. Samsung isn't really known for its sound. It doesn't have the actuators and speakers on the back that you would see from the higher end QN95 and the QN900. However, they don't have amazing sound either, but it's definitely passable. It's not going to take the place of a sound bar or anything, but it's loud enough and it'll be fine in any room. But check out the transitions and the local dimming here with the smoke. Amazing content, but it really shows what the local dimming can do. Even though these TVs are better at keeping the black bars down, you can't hide it with smoke and those transitions. Tizen, while for me has always been a pain, I've definitely learned to appreciate it as I've lived with these TVs all year long. So easy to jump right back into the apps. It is very fast. Also, as you see me jump back into the PS5 as we move into gaming, I appreciate being able to jump right back in. It has now become my favorite operating system. Moving into gaming, it is one of the best mini LEDs in the land as we look at Astrobot from the PS5, as this colorful, high peak brightness TV looks incredible with this kind of image. Very colorful. However, as I've mentioned, you can then change the image to something more realistic, as you'll see in Horizon Forbidden West up next. But those colors really pop in games that are cartoony like this and say Street Fighter. You move back into Horizon Forbidden West, we'll show you the game bar and more importantly show you the different gaming genre settings. So important, as most game modes have different settings and different genre choices, but they don't change the image that much. Not for Samsung. You can change it completely. You can get crazy saturated, crazy bright, and then the original preset looks very accurate. You can also go into their version of HDIG, which looks like the original, and then you can also flex that and make that more vibrant. So important from gaming with PC and console, namely coming up on the PS5. This is going to be an excellent choice for you, as you're going to see Game Motion Plus in the next part of the video. But Samsung does have features that no one else has. On PC, you also have 144 Hz. But for me, guys, the game modes may look decent or good on the other manufacturers, but they are what they are. You can't change them much. Samsung, you can change it as much as you like. If there is a weakness, is they're too flexible, meaning that you have to kind of change it for each game, which is why you can customize them and save them in your customizable choices with the genre presets. So I really appreciate that. Excellent job with the game bar and again, flexibility of image. You also have HDR10 Plus gaming here, which I don't have any real games that utilized it, but it's here if you like it or need it. Gaming has become so important for many of you as you've moved from monitors to these amazing TVs. Very low input lag, but as you see me going into Color Booster and some of these features, they may be available from other manufacturers, but they have very little impact. The differences in presets here, as I reset the image, each setting, the active contrast really does brighten the image. So if you want to go into original, you can brighten it up with active contrast on low. You can have accurate and poppy. We move into Ghost of Tsushima, and we're going to show you the Game Motion Plus. Now, I haven't used this feature in the past, but it has become very popular. It gives you the sense of 120 and 144 Hz on 60 FPS games. This is very important on console, especially if you're thinking about the PS5 Pro. It will make those 60 FPS 4K upscaled games feel like 120, 144 as you see it on games like Tsushima and Days Gone. It does this without black frame insertion, so you're not getting the strobing or the darkness you would get from a clear. It doesn't dim it. It does change it slightly, but I do like it a lot. For those of you that like to wander outside of game mode and have motion interpolation, this is the way to have it and stay in game mode, keeping the latency and input lag to a minimum. Samsung is the only one in the business of doing this right now. And on Mini LED, it is very important, especially on console. You would simply disable variable refresh rate, which isn't really needed on consoles much as you think, as most titles have built-in VSync anyway, and let Game Motion Plus do its thing, especially now that we're looking for games that go over 4K 60. With something like the PS5 Pro, when it delivers that, you can then go over that. And it is an awesome feature, again, that only they have. As we move into Returnal, another game that highlights the excellent local dimming even in game mode. Now, the local dimming is never going to be as good in game mode as it is in their movie settings. However, it's still quite good. Specular highlights are fantastic. Again, moving into something like Street Fighter, you can choose between something very saturated and accurate. Awesome gaming TV overall. Now, what are your thoughts on the Samsung QN90D, and does the perception of the year change as we go in from TVs that are on your radar to the end of the year? Some of our favorites pop in towards the end of the year, even though they released early in the year. As we move into PC gaming, 144 Hertz. The transition in the control panel is flawless. No dropouts, no problems. Again, we don't have a one connect box. 144 Hertz, if you have a GPU that can push it, amazing feeling. Again, you also still have the presets where you can change and make the image look however you like. You see 144 here. I've also capped it at 144. Doom 2016, you can grab 200 FPS maxed. Now transitioning into original, you can go from a very poppy saturated image to the more natural preset. However, it still looks fantastic as the TV is very bright. But as I was saying, as the TV year goes on and prices drop, it's amazing how our thoughts change from the more popular TVs in the beginning of the year, where everything is new, fresh, and fun, to some of the quieter TVs we didn't recommend much as they were just too expensive compared to the competition. As I mentioned a million times already, not only from other manufacturers, but from their own lineups. Now the QN90D is a TV that's easy to recommend, especially in a bright room, performs amazing in a dark room. I'll tell you, it's probably the best gaming mini LED on the market, other than the QN95D and the QN900D and 800D, obviously much higher price point. But I would give the edge over the other manufacturers for flexibility of image, functionality primarily, and one of the clearest game modes out there. One of the best out there for mini LED. Very easy to recommend for gaming as we move into Warhammer Space Marine 2. Now, as I mentioned, if there's any weakness in the gaming, is that you would feel like you're changing the game mode for each game. Just when you have the settings thinking the way you want them, you're like, I gotta change it. So that's why the custom settings are very important. Save them for games that are more cartoony and then games that are more natural. But Samsung's always had that, where their flexibility was always great, but at times you're like, it doesn't look good in this movie, it looks better in this movie, it looks better in animation. It's not a set it and forget it TV. Sony is a set it and forget it TV, but I appreciate Samsung's ability to change the image. Jumping into some COD, very responsive at 144 Hertz with DLSS enabled, everything maxed. We're rocking a 4090. And enjoyed gaming on this, not just for the video, but for the entirety in my studio. Very hard to switch this TV into something else. That's when you know you like something as a reviewer. Now, while I liked the QN90D when I reviewed it back at Samsung in the beginning of the year, having the larger size here was definitely something more I appreciated, especially when the price came down. But having 85 inches available, 98 inches, 43, 50, 55, and 65, what I love this year is they are all VA. There isn't differences in performance per size, other than probably the local dimming getting better as the TVs get larger. Obviously, having more local dimming zones, the TVs appearing brighter at larger sizes. But if gaming and streaming and movie watching is your focus, QN90D should be at the top of the list. In closing, the QN90D is an easy recommend now that the prices are lower. I feel it's better than the QN85, which is an excellent value. While not as good as the QN95, the 95 is very expensive and very hard for you guys to even see in store, impossible to see in store. Actually, the QN900D is very expensive and 8K. QN800D is much more affordable. You'll see that review in a few weeks. The QN90D is the top-of-the-line Samsung Mini LED, which will outperform both the S95D and S90D in a bright room. It's also excellent in a dark room. Its anti-glare capabilities put it above the QD OLEDs in that bright room setting. Amazing gaming TV, Clear Motion Plus, fantastic, definitely recommended this time of the year. I'm Brian. This is Tech Therapy. Thank you so much for watching. Please consider liking and subscribing. Take care. Love you guys.
It's better to burn out than to fade away. Neighbor